Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode. I wanted to dive in about something that may be uncomfortable. I want to talk about burnout and the cultural pressures that drive us to keep pushing. You know, that hustling mindset and what it does to our mind, body, and soul. Even when all the warnings are there, why do we ignore it? The reason I got started in this is just a few days ago, I received a WhatsApp message from a friend. She goes, "Hey, Kirti, check out this link." It was an article about the tragic death of Anna Perayil, a 26-year-old woman who entered the workforce for the first time and worked herself to death at the prestigious firm of Ernst& Young. And at the time of recording this, everyone is in shock, but also very worried about speaking out loud about it. The link was the letter her mother wrote to the head of EY. Sadly enough, his reaction was one of dismissiveness. Now, I felt a wave of sadness, but honestly, I wasn't really surprised. It reflected something much deeper than just a toxic work culture, but also the culture of Asia itself, or the South Asian community itself. And this is quite uncomfortable to talk about because it is different and more complex than me saying it the way I am. Now, when I was thinking about it and thinking I'm not surprised, it's because I had my own experience with burnout a long time ago. Now, of course, my burnout didn't happen at a consulting firm, but it actually happened while I was running a yoga center, funny enough. Now, you'd think that running a wellness business, you'd somehow make me immune of it, but the truth was, it didn't make me immune. I was burning the midnight oil. My sleep was inconsistent. Wasn't eating on time. Some days it felt like a luxury. Other times I felt like I was back to back with clients or clients wanting my time, and I just didn't know how to tell them no. You know, when you're running your own company, customer service is everything. What I didn't realize was that I was neglecting the most important person, myself. But I didn't even want to admit it. When people tell me I was very busy, I would just say, no, I'm not. I even tried delegating tasks, but somehow everything came right back to me. I was very frustrated. But on a deeper layer than that, I was thinking about how I tried to explain to my doctors, and all I was met was with, the tools, Kirti, use them, they'd say. It felt very lonely, and I did not know what to do otherwise. There was that kind of like that dismissiveness made you feel like there was something wrong with you. Now, I am lucky I did have the tools, and yes, I did use them, and it took me out of the situation I was in, but it took me a long time. Now, burnout has this way of making you feel like you are not in control and there's no way out. So I really sat back and wondered what she must have gone through, and I don't think that I could. I mean, even at 39, this happened to me. She was just 26, much younger with much less experiences. And in some ways, did I also have difficult colleagues? Oh, yeah, I did. Did I feel alone in my struggle? Absolutely. But I was lucky because I had a little bit more experience than she did, enough so to recognize the burnout. So I asked myself, why does it take someone to pass away for us to start talking about it, and still so uncomfortably and so silently, because we're all worried about what is the consequences of speaking what's really on the mind? What are the true hidden costs of burnout? And why do we keep ignoring that internal voice inside of us that tells us actually, slow down, you know that there's something not right in this equation? Why do we ignore it? Because we're so worried of the financial repercussions. And yet we are told, hey, let go and take care of your mental well-being. Now, I was researching to speak about this situation, and I came across another podcast that discussed Anna's case. And I must say, I was a little taken aback by what this host had said. And this host was sharing about their own experience with working at the Big Four firm, proud to admit how they checked out and didn't really produce anything meaningful because they just wanted the paycheck so that they can grow their own personal business. To me, I was left wondering, well, isn't that somebody who fakes productivity? And because of that person, someone else ends up picking up the slack? In the case of someone like Anna, she kept wanting to prove herself and grow her career. And in her case, her manager would conveniently pass tasks to her so that he could attend a cricket match, a beloved sport in India, much like football in England. But again, it was passing off a task to someone else who was so eager to do it. And then there's this whole thing like I've been to many organizations and they'll tell me, yes, we have lots of wellness programs and apps to do this and to manage our productivity. And I can't stop but ask myself this one question. If you have all of that, why is the staff still working longer hours? Why are ethnic communities afraid to speak up and worried about not meeting endless deadlines or to get the job done? What is the real answer? What is the real solution to all of this? It's just not that simple. And so I hear someone like a leader like Narayana Murthy saying, employees needing to work 70 hours, and the finance minister, Nirmala Sitharaman, talk about incorporating spirituality in the education system, while all the time ignoring the real cause of burnout, which is how much intense pressure is faced in the workplace, but also how much intense pressure the society places on being successful, on working really hard and slogging it through, just like our ancestors, to make life work for us, that we're actually killing ourselves over a culture that never really rewards us. I mean, what is the meaning of our true life if we're working so hard that by the end of it all, we're just going to be exhausted? Those kinds of comments, I was raising my eyebrows. It reminded me of my elders, my uncles, who would always tell me and try to put me in a position of how a woman should be. I can relate to that, and I can tell you it is not easy to have to constantly prove yourself. As a woman and an Indian woman, you will find yourself burning out, and you have to end up being super strong and very vocal to have boundaries, but that can also come at a cost. Further research, I also saw that in the ILO data, Indians work on average 48 to 50 hours a week, and compared to the global average of 34 to 36. And that is excluding the additional hours women have to work unpaid labor if they want a family. I mean, you got to step back and think about her tragic death and having to sweep it under the rug. Being in such a culture and you're faced with a lot of family pressures, especially from a woman, you're learned to respect your elders. And many of the elders, especially the male, are the leaders of the household. And they may have sometimes more influence. Like in my case, my elders had more influence than even my father at times. And I saw the negative consequences that it had on me, the mental, emotional that toll that it takes. But even outside, when I had my own company, I faced a lot of times I would hear little microaggressive comments of like, shouldn't you be married by now? Aren't you putting your father down? And these little comments make you want and try harder, do harder, that you burn out because you're constantly proving yourself that over time you forget who you are in the long run. So burnout is a real big deal for me. I do have a personal investment to it. And I see it as a grief process because you go through a process when you're trying to prove yourself. At first, you try to convince yourself to keep going because you really feel motivated to prove yourself. And then you become anxious because the expectations are really high. The emotional weight is there. And you start thinking there's something really wrong with you. And then you start bargaining in the whole process because you're trying really hard now. You go, if I push a little harder, I'll get rewarded later. So I won't sleep now. I'll eat later. And all that bargaining, you don't realize invisible consequences on your physical health and relationships. In Anna's case, she sacrificed her sleep, her joy, and the very essence of life. She even couldn't celebrate her one celebration of achieving being an accountant. She didn't even complete the grieving process. She didn't get to the depression or the acceptance. It was already too late. So that's the cultural pressure. Now, you may ask me, you say, well, Kirti, okay, it's nice to paint this gloomy picture, but then what? So I want to give you a few things that helped me and that I do apply now. And I've really advise or recommend a lot of my clients when they're in high pressure environments like consulting or being even high functioning achievers, much like Anna was. There are a couple of things you need to get good at. And one of it is to equip your resilience. Working in a high pressure job means doing your research. So it's not just about job. Before you're getting into a job, find out how much of that pressure is there and how are you going to handle it. When do you need to give more energy and when do you need to not give that much? Strengthen your boundaries. You know, I used to hear always about saying yes so that you never miss out on an opportunity, but you should also learn how to say no and say no more often than yes, because sometimes when you say too much yes, you lose sight of yourself and you may not have the energy to give it your all to the one opportunities that do matter. So get to know what you're committing yourself to and where are you overcommitting yourself. Get good at your communications, especially talking about negative emotions, frustrations, irritations. Discuss it in a constructive way. No, I'm not talking about venting, microaggressive, or expectations. Practice framing it differently. When you keep practicing how to frame your challenges in a way that leads to a solution, if you can get good at that from the beginning, you're able to navigate your boundaries also much differently and your career. One of the big ones I tell my clients to do is do an audit for yourself. Every month or quarterly, do a check-in with yourself based on your energy. Notice how you're spending your time and ask yourself what is truly urgent, what is relevant to your role, how much are you distributing to different relationships. Be honest with yourself about these things. And if you're struggling to be honest and you find yourself constantly in that bargaining phase, then what you're doing is you are compensating, and at a certain point, it is going to have a consequence, but you just don't see it. And then finding balance between priorities, your preferences, and how you want to position yourself every step of the way. Checking in with yourself, it's not about mindfulness, it's about being practical with yourself. Because we are in a world where it's so easy to get constant information, to be constantly switched on, you can fall into a habit of constant doingness. And so finding your balance, you occasionally need to step back and reassess where you are so that you're not going to get into this cycle of burning out little by little and then only realizing it until it's too late. So Anna's story is actually not unique. I mean, I've heard countless of burnout stories, and a lot of them actually go unheard and untold in businesses, in corporations. But do you know a lot of them left their job so that there's actually no data to really prove it? But if the data existed, and if these stories were more visible, changes would come. And because we do believe in the power of data, right? And I noticed as I was researching that there was this other incident that took place a couple of years ago, also in EY in Australia, where a young girl committed suicide. In this case, because she felt that her surroundings was very competitive and her colleagues were just downright mean and racist. And when they did do a survey in the workplace, there was an article that shared that a lot of people did not actually want to talk about it. Nobody wanted to risk their career by speaking up. So they were worried by filling out that survey, what were the repercussions? So if the response can be traced back to you. Will you honestly be your true, authentic self in that job? Most individuals are always weighing up the risks, and if the risk is too high, many people will remain silent and endure the situation because they want to be secure in their life. So I'm back to that question. How can we improve accountability in firms? And is it only firms? Or is it also accountability in our cultures? While I do understand companies, every corporate, me being my own entrepreneur, you got to make profit. Otherwise, why are you in a business? But the key is, how do you bring profit and productivity and well being and find these three? Think of it as a Venn diagram. If you put these three together, what is the sweet spot? What do we have to do to get that? Because trainings are not working so effectively. One of the reasons why tech has become so big in the world is because we thought it would solve this whole issue of doing the tasks that would free up the time and also reduce the timings of work. But yet, why are individuals working such long hours? So we got to look at the burnout and what are the real costs of it. And how can we change that around? How can we change it around so that it can bring and inspire creativity? That the turnover is in balance and that it doesn't cost the company also in the long run. And how do we assess these wellness programs and apps? Because I tried it, and when I have a busy day, all those apps are put on hold. My priority will go to my work. So don't get me wrong, I'm not being negative about it. I think there is always potential. And in South Asia, the culture has to undergo a shift now. And I don't think it's just about big firms. I know being a South Asian, it's an incredible privilege to work for a large firm like EY or Google. All of these, it adds to the success and status. And these are important factors in the Asian culture. But I also have to understand that the way we are talking to one another in our culture has to shift because not everyone's going to be cut out for that intense high pressure. And some people are, and that's okay. And most of all, there is always a place where you can work that suits your level of handling pressure. So it's a very complex conversation today. There's a lot you can do with this. There's a lot that needs to be changed. Did Anna leave a legacy? Sadly enough, yes, she did. Not in the way that we wanted it, though. Not in the way her parents had wanted it, though. And I'm sure not the way she wanted it to. And if her mom's letter never leaked out, we would have never talked about it. I hope I created enough space for us to learn from each other and that this week's episode is an invitation to reflect on your life as we move into the third quarter of the year, into autumn, into the time period of change, that you reflect back and ask yourself, what would you like to change? What do you want to let go of that's not serving you and that's really sabotaging you from enjoying your life? And what does quality of life really mean for you? Let me know what you thought of this week's episode. I hope it was food for thought. Till the next one, take care.